Okay. Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year to you. This is the Environment and Economy Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Tuesday, 13th of January, 26. I shall open the agenda. Item 1, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. I've received no apologies, but we've got two people wanting to speak. Thank you. It's Richard Lloyd and Dave Healy are both indicating.
Councillor Lloyd?
Yeah, morning, Chair. As you know, I prefer to attend the meetings face-to-face, but this morning I've got a GP appointment at 11:30, so I'll have to leave at about 20 past. So apologies for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Healy?
Apologies on two counts. One, I had hoped that the briefing would be online. I assumed it would be, and I didn't make the briefing. I'm wondering if future briefings could be online. But my second apology is I have to leave at 3 o'clock should the meeting last for 5 hours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Healy. I certainly hope that it's we're not here by 3 o'clock, but we shall see. Okay, moving on to agenda item 2, declarations of interest, including any whipping declarations. To receive any? Nobody's indicated. Okay, thank you. To move on to agenda item 3, minutes. To confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of December 2025. I shall go through them page at a time. Page 5, 6, page 6, Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chair. The top of page 6, I queried about the portfolio efficiencies, when they'd be available. It said they'll be presented in the new year. But could I also ask whether CROSC has received any information from the portfolios on efficiencies in the meantime? Thank you.
Okay, can I bring in any of the officers? Can any respond to
that? Thank you, Chair. No, we're still working through those at the moment. There was a discussion yesterday at a meeting just outlining initial thoughts, but we haven't formalised those at the moment. As soon as we have, we'll bring them to scrutiny. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Page 7, 8, 9, and 10. That's it. So can I move those? That's moved. Seconded. Can I have a show of hands, those in favour? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, any urgent matters agreed by the Chair? There's no urgent matters, but I just wish to say that due to officer availability, we're going to have to bring agendas item 9 and 10 forward. So they will be before agenda item 6. So move on to number 5, forward work programme. I'll hand over to Margaret.
Thank you, Chair. So the forward work programme starts on page 115. So page 15, and as you can see, we've got 5 items on there for February. March meeting will have the review of the 3 weekly bin collections and the progress update on the 30 mile an hour. Excuse me. We'll also have a report on the street scene compliance with contract procedures. We've got the annual update on communities for work in June, and then the annual performance report and fly tipping is down for July. Moving forward to the action tracking. Quite a few of those now have been completed. The information on the 3 weekly waste collection, sorry, there is a typo on that first column there. That's going to be within that March report. The Flintshire and Wrexham investment zone, that will be at least 12 months before we have a report back here to scrutiny. Next 2 are completed. Most of the short-term ones have been completed, but there are a couple of outstanding ones which are longer term. So, and then the update on page 20, the review of garden waste charges. An update was provided via email yesterday. So they have all been completed now. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alan Marshall online.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of the committee, but I'd just like to add something onto the forward work programme, if that's okay.
Yeah, fire away.
All right, okay. Following the recent snows, I'd like to have a review of the gritting policy and routes and an update to the list of salt bins and piles. Some wards of Flintshire are located at high level and are often above the snow line. My village of Trident, the altitude is around 800 feet, and the snow line is visible when going from the snow-free Ponzabotkin up to snowy Trident. Other wards, such as Holkin, will also experience the same. Some of the roads are narrow and are not suitable for large gritting lorries. Tractors and gritters then turn back, so part of the village remains ungritted and residents are isolated. Some of the roads on the gritting route maps are full of potholes and resemble the Somme, and haulage vehicles avoid them and go along roads that are not gritted. I've previously seen a list of salt bins in my area dated 2023, and it is incomplete and does not include salt piles. I would like the gritting policy and gritting maps to be updated, and the list of salt bins and piles list to undergo a consultation with local members and for it to be updated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Marshall. I'll just bring in the Chief Officer.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Marshall. We actually only recently reviewed the policy in September. So the next opportunity to review it will be September this coming year. Obviously, we can't change the policy mid-season as we're in the middle of operations because there are quite long lead-in times to do so. But so what we will do, we'll maybe meet with you separately outside of this committee meeting to understand what information you need. And then obviously we'll plan in, it's on the forward work programme for September anyway, so we'll plan it in for then.
Okay, thank you. That'll give me time to do a tour of the area and gather information for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. Just on Councillor Marshall's point, there were certainly issues about gritting in the area.
Councillor Healy, can I just say that we're dealing with the forward work programme? That's Councillor Marshall's had an answer to that one. So unless you want to bring something to it,
I will move on to the forward work programme, if I may. The forward work programme takes us as far as July 2026. Last July at a meeting, I did manage to get put into the council plan or revived the issue of rural resilience, rural communities, which had been in the previous council plan. And my motion was carried, and with the support of Councillor Richard Lloyd. I know the council plan takes us up to 2030, so I'm not expecting miracles overnight, but I am looking forward to that featuring in our forward work programme at a later date. So at this stage, I'm just saying.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Lloyd?
Yep, sorry about that, bear with me. Yeah, on the action tracking, that is mentioned about the report to identify the section 106s, and that should go to the forward work programme. As Councillor Healy said, that goes up to July 2026, but there's nothing on there to give a date when the section 106s agreements are going to be discussed. So do we not have a date for that yet? Thanks.
Okay, I'll just bring in Chief Officer.
Thanks, Councillor Lloyd. We don't have a specific date at this point in time. There is work ongoing on that monitoring. In fact, 106s are monitored on a weekly basis. But in terms of getting that information on a ward basis, that is a quite different piece of work. And as members, I think, know, there's a pressure bid at the moment for an additional enforcement and 106 monitoring officer. So once that post is filled, we will get that, we'll be in a better position to get that work to you. My anticipation is it will be late summer before we can bring that information to you. Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks for that, David. Yeah, I am being asked by the town council really if there's any money available for in my area. That's why I brought that up really. But thanks for that. I'll report back. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Wakeland.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Katie, on this one. Is it possible in the forward programme we can look at AHP collections getting on and off the list, how it's sorted, how the routes are laid out, and how we put out changes to the people that use it? Because I don't think it's working very well at the minute at all. Thank you.
Okay, bring in Chief Officer.
That's included in the report that's coming to you next month in March. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coggins-Cogan, did you have your hand up at all now? Okay, thank you. Councillor Bithell.
It's on page 17 again, and is regard to the 106 agreement. Will the local members, each local member, be told of the position regarding 106s in their ward? Because I've been chasing one, and there's some uncertainty in my mind and on the officer's mind as to whether that is still extant, really, because it's some 12, 15 years since it was actually put down on paper in the planning agreement when the plan was passed.
Okay, Chief Officer.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bithell. I think in the interim, what I would suggest is that if any ward member has a particular query with regards to 106, that we deal with that on an individual basis at the moment. So I'm not sure whether you've lodged that query yet, but if you want to lodge it with me, I'll make sure that we get you the answer to that specific one before we give a wider council-wide breakdown of 106s in each particular ward. As you'll know, Councillor Bithell, the 106s range from highway contributions, affordable housing provision, open space, the list goes on. So it's quite a detailed piece of work, but if you've got a specific query, we'll happily look at that in the interim. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nobody else has indicated. So with those points noted, we'll look to the recommendation on page 11. 3 there, that the committee consider the draft work programme and approve. And can I have a mover for those recommendations? Moved, seconded. And can I have a show of hands, those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. As said, now we'll move on to agenda item 9. And I will bring in, am I bringing you straight in, Niall? Oh, it's Chief Officer first.
Happy for you to go straight to Niall, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I'll bring Karen in momentarily, but just to give a bit of context, these are the 4th and 5th of 7 placemaking plans that have come to committee, part of quite a long-term process of development by the council, responding to the Welsh Government desire to see placemaking plans for all the towns in the area. And just a reminder, it is a precondition of funding from Welsh Government for town centre projects. These placemaking plans are either in place or in development. So it's an opportunity where you'll get to hear what the progress is on these 2 particular towns, and a chance to review the placemaking plans before they go to Cabinet in a couple of weeks' time. I'll hand over to Karen if that's okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Niall. Just a mic check. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so as Niall said, there is a condition that the placemaking plans are approved in place for future funding, and we've made considerable progress with 2 plans today. The first of which I'll take you through is Queen's Ferry. As with the plans already approved by Cabinet, we've adopted the same general approach with some tweaks to consultation and engagement to make sure it's fit for each town respectively. We have therefore adopted an 8-stage approach to developing the plan, including the use of open and closed data sets. They've been reviewed, and also quite heavy engagement with the public over 1,094 respondents to the Queensferry plan at various stages throughout the lifetime of the development of the plan. And that's both through the Give My View online software that was used, but also a range of in-person events, various times for people to engage. Also, as part of the placemaking plan development process, we've engaged a range of external agencies and organisations, as well as our own officers from across portfolios within the council. And I'm pleased to say that over 20 organisations have been involved in both Queensferry and Connah's key plans that we're considering at today's meeting. And that multi-agency approach is really key. It's not just a plan for regeneration team per se, per local authority to develop these plans and obviously then subsequently deliver them. It is an expectation that it's a very much a holistic approach and across departmental and multi-agency approach to their implementation. So in terms of the report summarising the findings and the work completed to date, Section 109 outlines the aims of the placemaking plan for Queensferry. And in order to deliver those aims, there's a range of objectives, and they're detailed within Section 110 of the report for today's meeting. There are 8 priorities. Each of the placemaking plans have a differing number of priorities, and for both of the plans we're considering at today's meeting, for Queensferry, there are 8 priorities. And you may recall from previous meetings and discussions about the plans that they tend to be divided between both people and place. So in terms of that split for this particular plan, there are 5 which relate to the development of the physical place, and that is things that need doing around assets, premises, the infrastructure, connectivity, examples such as those. And then there are 3 in the case of Queensferry that relate to quality of life improvements and opportunities for local people to effectively change social things or opportunities for them within their local area. I think it's really important to temporarily focus, as well as the development of the plan, to look at work that has been running in parallel to this, just to remind ourselves why we're doing these plans and why it's important for the local area and the people indeed. And just to interject, within the context of the report, some examples that have been completed recently over the last 18 months within Queensferry will include the following. So we've already been running a property improvement grant, of which 5 properties have benefited. It's just shy of £500,000 that's been invested, with property owners improving their own assets and contributing up to 30% as a bare minimum investment from those. And just some examples, they may be familiar to you, but Queensferry Sports, the King's Academy, High Q Garage, MOT Centre, and fabricator units, which are right on the sort of the edge of Queensferry, have all benefited from these recent investments. And they're sort of catalyst and kickstart projects that we expect to see continuing and subject to the plan being approved. So it's really important that this work has been done in parallel, and because we've had the work in draft, it's been acceptable to funders to have a draft placemaking plan that has levered that funding, and that's been well received locally. We've also operated a town centre activity and events grant, and over £20,000 has gone into Queensferry through that recently, through shared prosperity funding. And we've operated a tailored business support, which is an intensive 8-week programme through Save the High Street, and again uptake from businesses in Queensferry through that. And some greening as well, because obviously there's a range of activities that are talked about within the plan, and some things that we've already kick-started. For example, there are £77,000 invested in urban trees along Station Road in Queensferry last year, and also we now have a green infrastructure audit to guide future investment, and that's all been undertaken as part of the development of the plans. I think it's really important to remind ourselves of that, like I said, because I think sometimes we develop plans, and have done probably in the past, where they've sat and they've not been implementable. But I think it does show that the nature of the work and the type of plans that we're developing at this point for placemaking really can be brought to life and implemented. And then just leading into the resource section, therefore, of the report, you will have seen that it is an expectation management situation with these plans. They are long-term visions, and it's very much a case of looking about collaboration to bring about implementation. Whilst the cost of placemaking has been almost £250,000, it has over the last 2 years led to £4.4 million return on investment. And that's just through the regeneration work we're doing. There are other works obviously across the wider council and indeed by partners. And so, for example, there has been park ad for funding for various organisations in and around the area, which I know the Chief Officer for Street Stream and Transportation has kind of fed into this report, and indeed officers that have been involved. I think it's really important to say that local people have had an opportunity to say what they think about the priorities as part of the consultation second phase public opportunity. And there is support for the approach that we're taking with these plans, as there had been for the 3 already approved. And that's really, again, quite promising. There are not only approval for the priorities and support for that, but also the approach that we continue to propose to take, which is in terms of making the best of the resource that we've got available. It's looking at a 1 to 2 year action plan approach. And so therefore, every 1 to 2 years, we're reviewing what funding opportunities from external sources we've got, and therefore how deliverable aspects of the plan they are to be implemented incrementally, rather than obviously in a year or two's time it all be done. It is a long-term vision, as I opened with. So I hope that gives a flavour, a whistle-stop tour of the content of the plan, the work that we've done, the approach we've taken, and alongside that, the work that we've also been doing to implement projects that we continue to want to see, moving forwards as a result of the plans hopefully being approved in place, and action planning going on imminently, which is usually undertaken sort of within a month or two of the reports being approved by Cabinet, subject to that happening. I'd like to open for comments and questions.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Just to note first on page 125, on 110, on the very first paragraph, it says detailed in the draft placemaking plan for Connah's Quay. That's the next agenda item. This one's Queen's Ferry, so that just needs a typo to
Yes.
that.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just thank Karen for the valuable work which her and her team are doing with regard to placemaking, and in this specific case with regard to Queen's Ferry. When I was the relevant Cabinet member, I was very much involved in this, and I became aware of the importance of the work that's going on and the value of working to transform towns. It's not, as I see it, an attempt to recreate the 1960s in towns, because the market forces and so many things have changed this, but it is a matter of coming up with various visions that fill the gap. And this process is a very good one, which engages with the community, with town councils, with county councillors. So there is this full consultation. And I love the green aspects as well. And so I look forward to our towns being transformed in a way that will make them much more attractive and welcoming to people, and also better for the environment. So congratulations, well done, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Magpiers.
All right, thank you, Chair. Yes, I've seen the previous two. This is number 4. On the face of it, a lot of work's gone into this. We have our glossy brochures which show what the vision and aspiration is. But we have to be real and look at the reality. And when we look at page 127 and tell us that the resources will not allow the council to do everything everywhere, and viable property interventions will not be present in every town. So, whilst if it comes off, it's great, and we do need to support it. But my question is, how are we going to look at what is the priority? We're looking at Queen's Ferry, so I'll concentrate on Queen's Ferry. We have other plans in place, and we've got other plans coming forward. But we need to look at what is going to be of benefit to the town. So it's a case of prioritising. And what we need to look at is the next step from this glossy brochure is to look at it realistically. And because of the funding not being there, it's a long term, what is going to be done initially and what is going to benefit the area. Because we need to know, there are quite some, big failings, if you like, in the area. You look at the road junction outside the KFC there, that's been identified on the map as something that needs looking at. But we need to look at what the funding is and what is going to be prioritised. Are you going to put trees over new traffic infrastructure? Are you going to look at buildings above the traffic infrastructure? I think what we need is another paper to come back based on what the priorities will be. And we then need to list, yes, they're there, they will enhance the town, but it won't be happening anytime soon. So I think we need to be realistic and look at what is going to be a benefit for the town based on the resources available. And I think that that philosophy will apply to all the plans. Thank you, Chair.
Niall or Karen?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor Pearce. You're absolutely right. As Karen highlighted, managing expectations is going to be absolutely critical through this process. We've taken a pragmatic view, which is the placemaking plans are ambitious. They do set out, significant change for the towns, but each one is backed up then by a much shorter term action plan that's co-produced between ourselves and partners. So it's, as Karen said, it's not just a regeneration service, it's the wider council plus the wider public sector, which will set out in very practical terms what we will do in each town in the short term. So that local residents, so local businesses, so local elected members can see quite clearly what's planned and can hold us to account for that. And that's the process of prioritisation. That's the process of just understanding what resources are available at any given time, and making sure those are deployed effectively. Fundamentally, we will continue to lobby for increased resources for regeneration. It is, with 7 towns, we are stretched extremely thin, both in revenue terms, but also capital terms. Service has been enormously successful in securing investment in the towns over the course of the last 2-3 years. But we've got to see that continue. We've got to see that increase fundamentally. So you're absolutely right. There's a careful management of expectations that's needed, and a clarity about what actually is being delivered on the back of the plans. And hopefully the examples that Karen gave earlier gives you a feel that, even in the throes of developing the plans, there's activity on the ground, there's success on the ground, there's businesses benefiting from that co-investment from us.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that, Niall. So will you be coming back to scrutiny, decanting from these glossy brochures what is actually going to happen and what isn't going to happen? And if you'll forgive me, Chair, I forgot to ask a question on page 123, 106, was about the supplementary action plan. I don't see it in this report. Is that coming at a later date? Thank you.
Yep, that's one and the same. That is the action plans that Karen and I are referring to. The intention hasn't been to take the action plans themselves through the cabinet scrutiny cycle on the basis they are much more informal, and obviously that adds quite a lot of delay to the process. We're talking 3-4 months. May I make a suggestion, perhaps, Chair, that rather than bring each action plan for consideration, that maybe we bring them collectively to a scrutiny meeting in the future, where you get a chance to review what those action plans are saying and progress towards delivering them, and that maybe that becomes an annual item.
Yeah, I think a periodic update would be very useful. Councillor Dolphin.
Yeah, just on that then, Chair. Yeah, good suggestion by now, because this is the 4th and 5th plans, and the others weren't agreed to come back to scrutiny. So a collective response probably would be the most efficient way of doing it. and answering the questions for scrutiny. Of course, any action plans that are coming in the future, although Karen outlined, actions are always ongoing, but in the future, and the recommendations are, they are to approve the coordination, development and implementation of an action plan for Queensferry and Connors Quay and individually. That will be done, of course, with all the consultees locally. So it's not just the council going ahead and doing things. There's agreement on what's to be done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We've got 5 more speakers. Councillor Coggins-Cogan.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start my comments just following on what's been said about the action plans being brought here. I think it should be a relatively light touch from this committee on the actual action plans, though, because I think they are so place specific that it should really be the local member that carries more weight than this committee. We should be looking at the process and the policy, and the action plans themselves have to be much more sort of dealt with by the individual members. Which brings me on to my original comments, which were, firstly, thank you to Niall and Karen for the report. It is interesting. I didn't print it all out because there was a lot in there, so I just printed out the highlights. I did read everything else online, and there's obviously a huge amount of work has gone into it. To slightly disagree with some of the comments earlier on, I think it's good to be ambitious. I think that we should just perhaps go 10% beyond what we can actually deliver, because we should, be reaching for that. We should be stretching the whole time. I think if we go 10% under, then that's all we'll ever achieve. So I think it's good that we, do stretch ourselves. I appreciate the point about managing expectations, though. That's important. We can't be seen as failing, but I think we do have to stretch ourselves and be seen to be ambitious if we're going to be ambitious for our communities. So I would just want to pick up on something that Karen said, which was, she said that there were several sort of in-person events for consultation. I just wondered if she could explain, the question sounds accusatory, but it's really not, why in-person was chosen over perhaps online-only consultation events, and if she could just go into a bit more depth about the local member engagement, because that's what I'm particularly interested in, is how, I think there have been instances in the past where local members have said, don't do X because that's a silly idea. It's gone ahead, and then it's had to be reversed at a later date, and it's cost the council money. So I just want to know how much meaningful input local members get, and why we went with in-person events and not just online-only events. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Karen, are you okay to go with?
Yes, absolutely. So the whole approach and lessons learned from obviously completing 3 plans already has led us to refining the process for consultation, and the various stages that we consult at firstly start with, as we're reviewing the data at a very early start, mapping out what our statistical evidence is for each of the towns. We, in parallel to that, undertake consultation phase. So that's what we refer to as phase 1. And that's an early stage of that 8-step process that I mentioned earlier. We did an online consultation because that's where we know we get the bulk of responses. It is evident that people choose and have the flexibility to choose when they undertake that. And it's exactly the same process that we do in person as we do online. So they mirror each other effectively. The opportunity to engage in person obviously is an opportunity for people that don't have digital access to the surveys that we've put out previously, and then repeat that process at a later stage within that 8-step process as well. So what we've done is to identify within each of the towns, and in the terms of Queensferry, it's been places previously such as T Calon, Deeside Leisure Centre, I think the Legion, the Institute within Queensferry. We've had various localities where we've identified, spoke to local people and where they access. They don't return anywhere near the attendees that we see, that fluid flow of completion online. But it's not just been a case of doing one or the other. In terms of inclusivity, it's been really important that we've had a range of these things ongoing at the same time. We've also worked with members of the governance structure, so people and places. There's members of that group that represent certain cohorts of the population that might be harder to reach, and sure, as you know, our responsibility as local officers, local authority officers, I should say, is to engage with those, probably in the margins that wouldn't necessarily choose to if they weren't helped to. So represented on that group, we've got older people, young people, people who are struggling perhaps with housing solutions, youth groups, and through sort of play activities. So there's a range of other opportunities that we've provided, and response from each of those officers to feed into that and to shape that consultation. And it was those sort of responses that have led us to undertake both the online and the in-person, because of, again, back to inclusivity and accessibility of the opportunity to comment and feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for that very comprehensive response. That is very interesting. So essentially, I mean, if I can sort of, not to put words in your mouth, but essentially, online only doesn't cover enough of a consultation to reach people who you said like are on the margins or digitally excluded. We do need to have in-person consultation. And also, you mentioned sort of there were 3 locations. Was that just for Queensferry?
The Queensferry, obviously, for each town we operate a different regime. For Connasky, I'll touch on under that report where we've undertaken our consultation there. Where we have connect centres, we have in other towns looked at those, but obviously in Queensferry there isn't a central connect centre that the council runs, so that's why we looked at some of the alternative locations. And I appreciate, just in response to your point as well, Councillor Coggan-Coggins, around the member engagement. So at each stage of the 8-step approach, we've obviously tried to keep our elected members, certainly, the member representing the ward that the town covers, that can often involve multiple members. So, for example, early stages where I've just described the data analysis and the statistical evidence and the findings from that, and running that in parallel to those consultation events, that was summarised, and key findings are then shared with elected members at that stage. We did that previously with Buckley, Holywell and Shotton. And then from that work is then developed into and shaped the priorities, informed, where we look at putting future prioritisation of projects. And following the completion of that work is then reshared with elected members and town councils. There was also an opportunity for both Queensferry and Connasky to meet around that if there were any areas of concern or inadequacies in terms of things not included that should have been there. And there wasn't a request for that meeting in the case of Queensferry. Also, the second phase consultation that we undertook was very much around, does the 8 priorities we've identified, is that suited? Does that fit? Does it feel like Queensferry, and that they're the things that need addressing? And the public response was very much, in line with other responses we had, that they are suitable. They do address the concerns or needs for investment and improvement in the future, but also in terms of the approach to then look at that 1 to 2 year placemaking plan. That was something else that we tested with members and also the public at consultation stage. And again, there was full support for that approach to reflect the resources that we have at any given time.
Okay, thank you very much. That's answered everything. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Richard Lloyd.
Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Niall, for the excellent report about Queensferry. I'm sure Niall will predict what I'm about to say next. I'm very impressed with what's been achieved in Queensferry, but I'm also very jealous of what's been achieved in Queensferry and other places, because we mustn't forget that Saltney is a town. We don't seem to have included it as a town when these placemaking plans were first produced. I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of 3 buildings in desperate need of improvement. I'm sure there are more. There's lots can be done. I mean, we have met with Niall, and we do still live in hope that any action plan or next phase of these placemaking plans that Saltney is included. So I know Councillor Healy, thank you. In the past, you've mentioned Saltney, and I do appreciate that. But So please don't forget us. We have got lots of things that needs doing here. So I just had to bang the drum for my area. Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Bithell.
Just a comment, I was a bit concerned when Councillor Richard Lloyd mentioned Hope, and I expected Dave Healy to come in at that particular point, because Hope would probably make a similar case that it is also a town. But there you go. Thank you for the report. It's a very interesting report. I've got some affinity with Queen's Ferry. I taught there for 8.5 years, so I know the particular area well. And some of the issues and the problems that are raised in this report were present at that particular time, and I'm going back some years to the late 70s, early 80s, and some of those problems are still there. And you're quite right in what you say about that. I've got concerns which have already been raised about the financing of all this. You know, the sums that are mentioned here, £90 million, they've been made available by Welsh Government to regenerate towns in Wales. Well, we got 7, 8, or perhaps even 9 towns in Flintshire, but you know, how far will that go across the whole of Wales? Additional money is mentioned here too. I'm not quite sure really. We spent something like £248,000, I think, in £254,000 already in preparing these plans, which is understandable. A lot of work has gone into this, a lot of consultation. But I'm just concerned really about what money will be readily available to actually put these plans into practice. Again, I have to say, reading some of the reports, I've been here before, but a deja vu really, because again, we've had attempts really to upgrade several of these towns in the past, haven't we? And we've done so. And a bit concerning too, some of the things that we're now proposing or suggesting to improve them, like railings in the towns, for example, along the side of the footway, the pavements, that we're recommending now, and these reports that these be removed. You know, so some of the things we've done have actually not helped, if you take this report in its entirety. So that's a matter of concern as well. And again, you know, some of the things that we've done, I mentioned the toilets here. The toilet block was closed how many years ago? And it's still standing. You know, really, we failed as a local authority, really, in tackling some of these issues or not carrying them through in that particular sense. Just again, a small matter, but an important one. It mentions on page 174, or page 44 of the actual report, that Queen's Ferry is a town that lies to the southeast of Chester. Well, the map's upside down, I'm afraid, if you're looking at it from that way, or your compass is faulty. It's certainly to the west of Chester, probably, and that needs to be addressed as well, because it's a fundamental key point, really, I think, in terms of place, establishing a sense of place. Thank you.
Okay, no.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Bithell. Yeah, again, you know, we have got a role to really carefully manage expectations, to really carefully show what we can achieve with the resources available. In the answer to your question, you know, that Welsh Government pot of money doesn't stretch very far. It gets very thin when you start to look at how many towns are in Wales and the needs of those towns. What we can do, though, through the placemaking plans is 2 things. One is to have ambitious visions that really attract above our lion's share of the money, above our fair share of the money, by having a clear vision, by having a real track record, excellent delivery. Then we, as we already do, get more than our share, and we want to continue to do so. Further as well, you know, we do find that other pots of money arrive from time to time, often late in the day, often unexpectedly. And again, having good plans in place with projects as worked up as they can be, means again we're well placed to take advantage of those. And Karen's team has been extremely successful, for example, with the Shared Prosperity Fund, where they've been one of the biggest beneficiaries of that programme, because of their ability to secure external funding and their ability to manage that funding and to deliver on the promises they make. And that is part of it as well, that actually, although the headline sum for what's available is limited, you know, the right approach means we can go above and beyond that, and have done so in the past. You raised that there are issues there that are long-standing issues and that are wide in the regeneration. I think it's a really important point. Fundamentally, the placemaking plan, as Karen mentioned earlier, isn't a regeneration placemaking plan, it's a council placemaking plan. And we hope through the work that Karen's team does in engaging across the council, that other services can use the plans as well as a guide for their future investment as well and their future delivery to respond to the needs that the communities in each of those towns have identified.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Moving on, Councillor Richardson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I'm going to wait till it's agenda item 10, if you don't mind. Some of what I've got to say would cover 9 and 10, but I'll wait till it comes to Connors Quay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Wakelam.
Thank you, Chair. It was just more on the consultation parts and things. On the 27th of December, the council put on their Facebook page all the information about Shotton and the plans that they were going through, which then received 60 odd comments. Most of them either negative or with constructive comments on there as well, which, looking at that, they would never engaged in the first place. I just wanted to know, does the council look at these kind of comments that are put there? But then going on from that, that was then shared onto 15 different other Facebook pages. And off that, one of them was Holywell. And every comment onto the Holywell Flintshire page was, we're never going to get anything like this. We never get any money. It always goes down the D-side corridor, that kind of stuff, even though they've already had it. So the comments that are out there, we are not doing ourselves any favours. We're not putting enough information out. If every comment on the Holywell one was negative towards the council because we don't do anything for Holywell, which is really frustrating. And the second point, on the regeneration of Queen's Ferry, on page 50, there's a really angry diagram with lots of arrows and zigzags. We are taking into account the new bridge and all the new work when we're designing that side of it, yeah? Because they're going to landscape that whole area into a completely different, that won't look anything like that in, I don't know, hopefully 3 or 4 years, because that'll be all green park area with a new road through the middle of it and footpaths. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Wakelam. The social media thing, we could probably have an agenda item on in itself, couldn't we? I'll bring Niall and then Chris wants to go in.
I'll take the second one first. The placemaker plan diagrams, take them as a vision for the future. There may be some considerable time before they come to be, and obviously any works that are done will bear the sort of context at that point in time. So that's not a firm plan for the future. In terms of social media, I can only speak for the service directly. We do not engage on social media. The scale of capacity that it would take to do that, and the returns in terms of whether we'd actually change any opinions, we just don't have that capacity. Unfortunately, we use the council formal channels to communicate what is happening. And as Karen's outlined, we've put a lot of work into putting information out there about what's happening. But no, we don't engage in on day-to-day conversations on social media.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dolphin.
Yeah, thanks, Roy. Councillor Wickham. The social media aspect is the same all over the UK, I would think. It's mainly negative if you concern the council. I went to the Holywell Connects for their one-to-one events, and my wife did the online form for Holywell. And neither of us post negative comments ever about our local town, because it just drags our local town down. And people that live or comment on their local town need to remember sometimes that you need to be positive. And I would probably recognise some of the names of those tags on those Facebook pages. I never comment on them myself, but I would recognise the names, and maybe I know some of the people. Maybe I don't know most of them, but I would recognise some of them. And the same people make the same negative responses. We need to be more positive about all our towns, 7 towns, plus Saltney, of course, which is not in these plans. But maybe again in the future, might be, once these are finished. We need to be positive about all our towns and go forwards and get on with these action plans and deliver for the local people that are being consulted and respond to what the council are doing. Thank you.
With the Facebook page part, it's our Facebook page, the Flintshire County Council. I thought we'd at least get feedback to the necessary, because if the information has come from, say, your department to the Facebook person or persons, I thought they'd at least feed back to you what you're getting back of it. Because I mean, like I said, most of them are negative. Most of them, think that we, don't do anything. But there are some on there, some people that live there, like Chris was saying about the barriers and things, very negative, but other things very positive. So it was just to get that kind of feedback after the effect is annoying, but it would be, a way of capturing it.
Yeah, just maybe the preamble should say direct them to the link to do the online form, because we won't engage because once you start engaging, you roll the ball with it, isn't it? Okay, thank you. There was no further speakers on that one. Move to the recommendations on page 121. To review and support the draft placemaking plan for Queen's Ferry and to support the coordination, development and implementation of an action plan for Queen's Ferry. Can I have a mover? Moved, seconded, and show of hands those in favour. That's fully carried. Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item 10, which is the placemaking plan for Connors Quay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hand pretty much immediately to Karen. The preamble I said last time is the same preamble for this one, so I won't waste your time by repeating it.
Thank you very much, Niall. And equally, I will not go through the same sort of introduction in terms of the 8-stage process. What I've just said in relation to the previous agenda item 9, very much stands for Connors Quay. We've took the same approach as I've already mentioned earlier in this meeting with each of the placemaking plans. The only thing being the point that Councillor Coggins-Cogan made just in relation to consultation and particularly the locations. For Connors Quay, there is a Connect Centre in Connors Quay, so that was one of our engagement sort of places. We've also done some work in Cambrian Aquatics. There is, again, limited response to in-person responses. We've actually had quite an extensive response to the plan for Connors Quay to aid the development and work through that 8-stage process. So for the case of Connors Quay, we've engaged 1,606 respondents to the online and in-person consultation opportunities. We've also had a special meeting with Connors Quay Town Council held back in July 2025, and that was once we'd undertaken the development of the work to identify statistically what are the issues and needs in Connors Quay, and then translate those into early findings and early priorities. It was at that point that we had a meeting with, firstly, elected members were informed of that and given an opportunity to feedback, but then that special meeting with Connors Quay Town Council, which they, very much welcomed, and it was a very participative meeting of an evening, if I recall. And that was really useful because in terms of these plans, if we don't get the feedback from the public or indeed the elected members and town councils, they're not as robust as they can be. And I'm pleased to say I think it was really, really useful to have that meeting in Connors Quay at that particular stage in the development process. So similarly to the previous agenda item, the aims, objectives and priorities are detailed within the report in sections 108, just identifying the key findings from our data and consultation, and then respectively aims and objectives in sections 19 of the report and 110. As with the previous agenda item, there are 8 priorities. Not all plans have 8 priorities. It's just the case that the 4th and 5th that we're considering at today's meeting both do. And again, there are 5 placemaking priorities that are focused specifically around the place, the connectivity, the infrastructure, premises, assets, that kind of feature. And then 3 that are around local people and their particular needs and sort of social issues. So as I said, the key aims and objectives and priorities are located, can be found in the report. We've very much undertaken the same sort of approach as I've already mentioned. It's useful to hopefully put into context some of the work that in parallel to the development process that's been ongoing and the investment that's taken place within Connors Quay. So in terms of that, there was quite a considerable project that was delivered through Connors Quay Docks with the Shared Prosperity Fund. So £290,000 has been invested in that particular location, and that's to improve CCTV, lighting and a range of environmental improvements. There's also the property improvement grant that I mentioned in the previous agenda item that covers all 7 towns. And I'm pleased to say there have been a number of properties within Connors Quay that have also benefited from that, many of which have actually been vacant. So we've turned, long-term vacant space into usable space, and new uses have come into the town. An example of that at the moment is Motor World, which stands quite prominently on the corner at the crossroads at the lights, in quite a civic area of Connah's Quay, just off the B5129. That's the most recent opportunity that we've secured investment for with grant, and the owner is contributing quite a significant amount into that. Just further down from that, around the corner, the former greengrocers that's stood vacant for quite some time, that's currently going through completion of a property improvement grant, and that will be opening imminently. We're working with the owner of that site. Similar to Queen's Ferry, we have done a number of greening projects in Connah's Quay as well. So the memorial area, we were approached by the Inter-Service Committee looking for funding. They maintain that memorial space, and there are planters that have now been adopted through the grant funding that we've put in to procure and provide those in the first place. There's an adoption process now in place for local groups and schools to maintain them. They're evergreen planting, and that adds some colour and interest to that particular space, which the Inter-Service Committee wanted to keep that quite open because hundreds of people attend, obviously, their annual memorial event. But they're the kind of small scale projects with some of the shared prosperity funds that we've been able to do, and also Welsh Government investment on the property side. Similarly to Queen's Ferry, there's also been some activities and events money that have gone in, a couple of grants awarded within the last 12-18 months for local groups to run their own activities and events. And there are plans, obviously, at the moment in terms of green infrastructure. Now we have an audit. It's how do we build upon that to improve not just the climate resilience, but the attractiveness of the place. Urban trees being an example of that, already completed in front of the precinct, which was completed less than a year ago. Again, with some of the funding that my team has secured. So a good range of projects that have already been delivered, but obviously the plan for Connah's Quay and the aims and objectives that identified does allow us to use those as a catalyst again to look at future projects coming forward. And we do propose, as I've already outlined, the same approach with the 1 to 2 year action plan being developed following approval, subject to cabinet approving, for moving these projects forwards. And in light of what we've already discussed, it's the same issues really around expectation management and availability of resources. But the point now made very well into the last agenda item, if we don't have these plans and then they're not ambitious enough and they're not robust, then we're not going to be in that position to start scoping out future projects and secure that investment, which is obviously competitive across both Wales and the wider UK. So open to comments on this particular report, and appreciate the length of these documents as well in terms of the background reading. Just so you're aware, there are executive summaries of these, and all of the placemaking plans and the executive summaries and findings from consultations, that's all posted online at a point when we can get that all collated and posted. We're also going to be launching a placemaking in Flintshire website, which has been under development. So all those kind of key documents and also success stories as we complete projects, they will be posted there, and that might be really relevant in terms of the future reporting to this committee, because in the public domain there will be the 1 to 2 year action plans, and all people that contribute to that in terms of the range of organisations, they are aware of that. So they're aware they're committing to delivering something that we will track, and we will put an update back into the public domain in terms of accountability and deliverability. So just in terms of where other information can be found, that is pending. It's going to go live imminently in terms of the website updates. Open to questions.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. Everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Thanks, Karen, for the report. Thanks for visiting the town council. I know it was really helpful for all the town councillors and county councillors as well. Just a very quick one on one of the maps. I don't know which page it's on because there's lots and lots of pages. It's got down the new cemetery at the East End as Golfton Park. It's not a park, and it probably never will be because of what it's used for already. A couple of points I picked out. A replacement bridge at Bridge Street. I know it's on the border with Shotton, but but that would be amazing. That would also, because it links into D Park, so it would help people. It's a really steep bridge. I think everyone knows that part of Connors Quay was sort of bordered by the river, the railway, Wepper Brook, and the bridge over the railway at that section. It is quite a steep bridge, and if we could, walk and wheel over that and link in with Shotton Station lower line, that'd be brilliant. I think it's I think it's great that we're going to try and make Connors Quay a place to stop rather than drive through, because when you're local to the area, Queensferry, Shotton, Connors Quay, all the way through to Flint, it's known as the bottom road. That's what it's known as. It's just the bottom road. It's not really Connors Quay. It's not Shotton. Um, I think it's great the funding we've already had down at the docks, and we're wanting to link up little, bits of the town, parklands, stuff like that. Um, Obviously, I support the principle of regeneration and greening of the high street, but it does come with a but. Um, Without a robust funded maintenance plan, this investment could risk being wasted. The current condition of the high street is already a concern. We have persistent weeds, bent railings, dirty street furniture, worn and broken road markings, and pedestrian crosses with non-functioning signage. So by that, I drove that way this morning just to have a look. So where you would cross the road and stand in the middle, the little arrow signs, they get knocked over and they just get a cone put on. They don't get replaced. Just the overall impression is one of neglect, really. And it's particularly stark alongside the recent private investment that you've just mentioned, Karen. Ones I can think of are Full Circle Security, obviously Lidl's, massive, massive for the town. And they're all well-lit shop fronts that are undermined by the poor condition of, the surrounding area. I drove past, I know I shouldn't mention Shotton, but there's a really new travel agents there, and it's all lit up lovely. And then you just look around. If we're going to be adding planting, crossings, and other green infrastructure, it'll only increase the ongoing maintenance demands, really. And if we can't maintain what we've already got, what already exists, we've got to be honest with ourselves about maintaining anything additional. I like cycleways. I cycled to work when I was a bit younger, not so much now, but they must be supported by year-round maintenance, including winter measures such as leaf clearing and gritting. Poorly maintained cycle infrastructure, they quickly become unusable and unsafe, and that goes in the summer as well, when vegetation's not getting cut back, and obviously the winter. And I know it's something I've raised at Scrutiny before, and the funding is just not there to maintain cycleways linking the residential area to the industrial zone. It's just not there. And finally, any changes we put in must not worsen traffic flow or parking provision, because anyone local knows that the route has been congested for 40 years. Residents will rightly complain if any scheme we do is perceived to slow traffic further, and parking must be increased and made easier to use, not reduce. If we want to support the local businesses and avoid the perception that it's not just a waste of public money. If we want this scheme to succeed and retain public confidence, maintenance, traffic impact, and parking must be treated as essential, not optional. And I know that all sounds a bit negative, Karen. It's not meant to be, but if we're struggling to maintain what we've already got there, and what we've already got there by the brochure already says it's, I think of the word it uses, dirty, but it's untidy, it's broken, it's worn out. If we're struggling to maintain what we've already got, I think we need a robust maintenance plan put in place alongside, installing new stuff. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Richardson. Karen, do you want to respond?
Yes, just in terms of that, I mean, I can't comment on behalf of the Streets in Transportation portfolio. Obviously, the Chief Officer is in the room, but we do work closely with colleagues in that portfolio in particular when certainly designing schemes. So, for example, I know you yourself, Councillor Richard, said not to mention Shotton, but we have got live schemes. I think that was the communication and PR comments that a councillor made earlier in relation to the Facebook content. And the schemes that we develop, we do robustly look at what is maintainable. We don't just pull in funding to make the design and deliver these schemes without then the consideration. And there is an internal approval process for that, that anything that goes new or improved does have to be discussed and fully approved by colleagues within Streets and Transportation, because obviously indeed it's those officers part of their maintenance schedules that are going to take on that responsibility. So there is that mechanism set up internally that's relatively new. It's only come in over recent months, and it's basically been kick-started with some of those investment pieces that I've already mentioned during the course of this meeting, because we don't want to create scenarios where it's white elephants we've invested and it's not maintained. So I know proof is in the pudding with that, but obviously there is that new approach that we're taking collaboratively amongst officers.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. That's reassuring to know that, you know, we sort of are looking at that alongside, as well as spending money. We need to maintain, firstly, what we've already got, and secondly, anything new we put in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Biddle.
Yes, again, I'd like to thank the team for the report. It's a very interesting report from beginning to end. We're dealing with what we have on the ground in this particular case, aren't we? And, you know, Connorskey is a classic example of urban development along the main road there, the A494. And we have what we have on the ground there, you know, and it's going to be difficult. We're not starting afresh, a clean slate. We're going to deal with what's on the site already. And I think the report has drawn many of those particular issues together. I think as a word of warning, you know, it does mention, I think on page 50, that some of the things that have been done in the past, you know, have been sort of piecemeal and poorly detailed in terms of intervention and haven't really improved the quality of the asset there and so on. I think there's a word of warning there, really, that we don't replicate that in what we do in the very near future. Mentioned there about the development of the square area, which is close to the civic centre, civic hall, and so on. And I think that's important. You know, certainly talking as a Mold member, you know, the development of the square in Mold has been a huge impetus for us and for local organisations, school choirs, various festivals and so on to be held there, and to, you know, to bring the community together. And I hope that can be developed in the case of Connorskey. It will certainly help. I'm a bit surprised that more has not been made of Wepper Park in this particular context. You know, we've been told, I think, by the countryside team that the number of visitors to Wepper, which has surprised me in the past, we're talking about thousands of people who come to Wepper Park and come from a very wide area. You know, it's from Merseyside and the Manchester area, we've been told in the past. So certainly it has a great deal of attractions with Yulo Castle and so on within that particular area. And I think we should be building on that too, more than we are, I think, in this particular report. The dock area, again, was original Connorskey, wasn't it? Connorskey was built around the old docks and the area around the Church Hill. And I think, again, that's very much highlighted in this report. I'm a bit surprised that the Deeside Watermen have not been mentioned. I don't know whether they're still going, but again, you know, they're running trips, for example, in the summer months and so on, down the Dee to the Weir, you know. And again, I know many people who've been on that and spoken of it, you know, quite highly. And again, that would add to the attraction of the dock area and so on, and bring more people down there and sort of highlight the maritime interest really in that particular area, particularly in the past and its heritage. So I'd like to see that sort of brought more into the fore. And again, the mention in the report of linking the areas, linking the cycle path, the North Wales cycle path, and the dock area, which is very close by. And Webber Park, I think that's important because I think that will attract people. I don't think we're ever going to attract large numbers into Connolly because of the shopping facilities, because they're simply not there. And the precinct, as it's called, on the main road there, it's very much a 1970s, 80s development, and it is what it is. Small number of shops there, and not a great deal of appeal. But certainly, I think we can sort of feature on some of these other aspects, really, in terms of getting people to tarry a while in Connah's Quay, and as Councillor Richardson has said, not just sort of simply whizzing through, for example, to get somewhere else. So, I welcome the report. It's very, very, very good, and I think it promises a great deal if it can be accomplished and so on. But I'd like to see more made of Webber Park, because it is already a major attraction. And I think, in terms of developing the dock area, in terms of trips down the Dee, etc., would also help to benefit that particular area. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Karen, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, just to respond in terms of a couple of points there. The action plan should help pick up some of these points that Councillor Bithell has just made. And following the town council meeting that we had back in July 2025, Webber Park did come out as an area of focus from that conversation, as well as the square that you've also mentioned, that civic sort of area. What actually happened following that is there was a further in-depth meeting with the service manager for countryside services. Tom Woodall met with the team and ourselves just to scope that out a little bit more, just in terms of the plans already in place as part of his work and how they dovetail to the placemaking approach that we're taking. Tom and that service is also represented on the internal governance structure for the placemaking work through the Places group, so that is feeding into that. So they are separate pieces of work, but they can come together through key opportunities for investment, and I think that's where we've arrived at, basically through those conversations that have led to Webber being identified as one of the area that needs better connecting to the other areas of Queen's Ferry, which of course is quite different to other towns. Each are unique, and that's what really came out at the town council meeting that we had. The one-off discussion around this placemaking plan and priorities was there are various aspects given the size of Connah's Quay and its population, and how do we better bring all these together, not just for local people, but also visitors. And it is, in terms of numbers and park runs and people travelling from Merseyside, Manchester area, we know it's very, very popular and has grown actually since COVID, looking at visitor figures. So yeah, they are all feeding together, but it's about documenting that, I think, in the 1 to 2 year action plan and plans for each of these sites and how it all kind of comes together.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Mike Pearce.
All right, thank you. Thank you again for the report. Very comprehensive. I think we've agreed pretty much that the action plans are key to all this. And I think it was mentioned about local members and the town councils. I think they have an important role, probably more than what we've got in scrutiny. We're looking at the overview. They'll look at the detail of that. But it seems to me, though, that the creation of the plan by the third party and the creation of your glossy brochure seems to me, it may not be true, but this is a feeling I'm getting, that they've been given the brief that, look, if money was no object, what would these areas look like? How could we enhance them? And I think that's what we've got in front of us. It's visionary, it's aspirational. Now, it's reasonable to expect that members of the public reading or looking through these plans could expect that what is in the brochure is going to be delivered. We know that's not the case because the report today tells us that. But I don't think the plan itself does do that. And so perhaps does the plan that's presented with all the graphics, does that need updating with a caveat to perhaps advise that because of budget limitations, it could impact some of the elements within this plan? Because when you look at it, and a member of the public picks it up, oh, that's great, that's right, the council are working on all this. I think it just needs something in there. Now, you wouldn't expect the people putting this together to put that in, because the brief is, give us a plan. And the plan's been given But I think it does need a caveat in there so the members of the public, when they're looking at it, they need to understand that although it's visionary and aspirational, because of the restraints, not everything will be able to come forward. And I think I would just make that recommendation that perhaps the plans themselves just need to have that put in, just to not pretty much warn people, but just to sort of try and deal with their expectations that the council will prioritise with the town council and the local members what they feel is important, but some of the items in there may not come forward in the short term. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. No?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And Karen mentioned that the website is under development currently that's going to present all this information. I think that's possibly the ideal place. People will access the plans and the action plans through that website. I think that's a good place to put a good narrative there about the reality of the funding on the ground. So, yeah, thank you for that, Councillor.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one in response to Councillor Bithell. So I was interested, he mentioned the key watermans. It was actually something happened. Key watermans doesn't exist anymore. So the town council, with massive help from Niall, driven by Councillor Debbie Owen, we've brought the building back into use. We've used grant money. The Sea Cadets are back in there as a permanent home, and it's also rented out to dance classes and everything else. It's been a lot of investment around that corner as well, with bollards put in, some of the block paving repaired and weed and everything. So, yeah, Councillor Bithell, that's what happened with Key Waterman. It's now a permanent home of the Sea Cadets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Richardson. Councillor Dolphin.
Yes, just a few comments really, because we've had a good debate on the two plans and on the previous plans as well. And these are honest reports from the council. There's no cover of it. They are visionary. It is aspirational, and some of the projects will be delivered. Not all of them, but some of the projects will be delivered. And in the report it says, although a total of £4.48 million capital and revenue has been secured by the council's regeneration team, which is extremely small, we may add, over the last 2 years, this does not approach the scale of regeneration needed in Flintshire town centre. So £5 million doesn't touch the surface, but things will be delivered. And for Councillor Richardson, on page 418, just to answer some of his queries, it does mention the B5129. It talks about that road many times in the actual report. And it says this has resulted in pavement areas looking dirty, with cleaning and maintenance appearing to be infrequent and insufficient for the intensity of the highway. It's a very busy road, and yeah, there's general maintenance problems, not just in Connors Quay, but let's accept it, all over the county and all over Wales. Every authority is in a position of having a lack of money for maintenance, road upkeep, etc. So a lot of things are in the report if you delve into it far enough. And yes, I think visionary and aspirational are good terms. They're positive terms. And many of the projects in our 7 towns and the ones that have been delivered so far will be delivered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move to the recommendation on page 217 to review and support the draft place making plan for Connors Quay and to support the coordination, development and implementation of the action plan. Moved, seconded. Show of hands, all those in favour. Very much carried. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Karen, for your support and presentation. Thank you. Okay, we move on to the agenda as it was now. Agenda item 6, feasibility of utilisation of mine water heat. Can I bring in Chief Officer?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. Ordinarily, I would hand over at this point to our climate change and carbon reduction lead, but Alex is currently poorly at the moment, so I'm sure you'll join me in wishing her a speedy recovery. So I will deal with this report at a relatively high level. I'm sorry, I'm not helped this morning by the fact that my computer has frozen, but we'll see where we go. We do have Ben from the climate change team on the call as well. Now, Ben was not the author of this report, but he's certainly more technically in tune with this than I am. So if we do have any questions, we'll certainly bring Ben in, and hopefully between the two of us, we'll be able to answer any questions that you've got. But as I say, this is a relatively high-level report for noting. And members will recall in July 24, we had a coal authority report which outlined potential opportunities within the county for using heat from underground mine water to meet local energy demands. And there was a request from this scrutiny committee, I think, to investigate that further, and particularly, I think, from Councillor David Healy. And so what we have done is we have cross-referenced the Coal Authority findings with Flintshire County Council assets, and we've mapped those to identify any potential heat end users. There were 6 originally identified, and following further work and feasibility, that was narrowed further down to 3. The first one being at Harden, the second in Mould, and the third in Buckley. Further feasibility work has been done on those 3 sites, and unfortunately, the work has determined that at this point in time, none are financially viable for a whole host of reasons, really. And just to backtrack, for those who are not familiar with the mine water and its energy credentials, at certain depths, the mine water is at around 21 degrees, which can be utilised in ground source heat pump arrangements. So it's pumped in and used as heating. And there are a range of difficulties with the 3 sites at the moment, ranging from land acquisition and land consent through to the cost of installation, the cost of service and maintenance. And quite frankly, at this moment in time, there are other much cheaper sources of renewable energy that can be used to assist in our carbon reduction aspirations. So I'll go no further than that, Chair, with the report. That is the conclusion, that despite our investigative work, the conclusions are very clear at this point in time that it is not financially viable to explore this any further. Particularly given our financial constraints, and also given the fact that other alternative renewable sources of energy are cheaper and at this point more reliable as well. So happy to take any questions from members, but it's a relatively straightforward conclusion. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank the Chief Officer for his introduction to this report? I'm sorry. Can I just say how sorry I am that that Alex Ellis is unwell, and I hope perhaps Ben or others will pass on my very best wishes to her. I was one of the culprits, members of the previous Climate Change Committee, who asked for this report, and I did so because I was aware of the fact that within Britain, the issue of groundwater source pumps and heating from mine water had not really been explored, perhaps as fully as other countries, for the simple reason that we, as the first industrial nation, had the coal and didn't really need to look at other sources of energy in the past. But by the same count, because we had the coal, we also now have disused mine shafts and the issue of the possibility of water. So this is an incredibly detailed report, and I gather that Hannah has drawn it up. It is an immense amount of work. I'm very grateful to her. We had to explore all options in our quest to try to leave no stone unturned in pursuing the ambition of getting to net zero by 2030. And I think we've given this a good exploration. On the surface of it, it doesn't look like it's feasible because of the cost involved, and I recognise that. Of course, it's based on a coal authority report, and I don't think it will have considered the Millwall Tunnel because that was associated with lead mining. So that one may not have been included, but whether we've got a different story there, I don't know. But thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Rose.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the report. There's a lot in it. Obviously, understand the outcome of it. But one query from me would be, will this report be passed to future considerations for the next LDP? Although maybe not commercially viable or viable in the public sector at the moment, to change what's currently there, to connect those houses in those properties. But should any of those sites be future proposals for LDPs, then it may be different if it's a fresh ground to install those, or if that is a commercial site where it may be more financially viable for a commercial operation to use it to heat warehouses or things. And if that's included within the LDP as a possibility or as a priority, then that may change going forward.
I'll bring in the Chief Officer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it's a good point, Councillor Rose. And I think first things first, technology moves and moves at a pace, doesn't it? So at the moment, we're saying it's not viable, but in future years, who knows, it may well be. And the beauty of the portfolio is that the climate change teams sit within the same portfolio as the local plan. So not that other departments don't talk to each other in the council. We're all on council, of course we do. But the team leaders all sit within the portfolio and have regular discussions about that. So I can assure you that the local plan team are cited on this report, so they will have their mind's eye on it when they do look at future allocations in future LDPs. Thank you for that, Councillor Rose.
Okay, any other speakers? Oh, Councillor Pearce.
All right, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the report. Very interesting. Particularly, if I can just be parochial for a moment, there's one list, there's two in Buckley, one in my ward at Burntwood, Pentry. Looking at the map on page 28, which comes under table 110, it does show there where it's identified as a good opportunity. It doesn't actually show where the boreholes might be. You've got various county council schools there, but it doesn't show you where the borehole is. Would it be one borehole? Because where you see you've got Drury CP school there, almost adjacent to it is a capped mine shaft. I remember these from kids. There's about 6 in the area. There's quite a lot of mine shafts and that in Buckley. So it doesn't actually show us where the borehole would be. And I was going to ask a similar question. Is this going to be sort of just put on the shelf, not forgotten about, but it will be put on the shelf ready for another day when technology moves over? Because I would anticipate that the water that's there now in the underground galleries will still be there at some point in the future. I do wonder where it sort of comes from and where it goes to, or whether it just sits there and whether it's renewable as you extract it. But I can see the point. It's a new technology. And I was going to ask the question about what is the cost of extraction versus the overall benefit. And if the extraction is more than your benefit, well, you just don't do it, do you, really? So, yeah, interesting report. Pity it's not going forward at this stage, but the fact that a comprehensive report is there, the water will be there for the future, and who knows, it may come to light sometime in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Pearce. You're absolutely right. My understanding is at least some of the boreholes are very close to some of the council assets, but it's the actual cost of the installation and the servicing and the likes that's prohibitive at the moment. But Councillor Healy's right. We absolutely needed to look at this. I think we had a duty to look at this in terms of our aspirations for net zero. And as we've said, the conclusions at the moment are it's not financially viable. But this won't be forgotten about, and it certainly will be revisited, and certainly will be revisited as part of the local plan review, because energy and sustainability is a key part of that process, isn't it? But thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bithell.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. It's a very, very comprehensive report and an interesting one. I found it very interesting because there's certainly a strong sort of mining background in my own family in the North Wales coalfield. This is an asset which has been developed elsewhere. Mention is made in the report of the Bolsover area, Derbyshire, where much has been done in regard to this. But it does seem to be very much so nascent technology, and I think there's a long way to go really before we can actually be sure of the benefits and how that will benefit our community and various opportunities here in schools or in businesses and so on. And again, from my knowledge of the subject beforehand, the deeper the mine, the warmer the water that's going to come up. And again, in our particular area of the North Wales coalfield, they were quite near the surface in many cases, the actual seams that were worked. But there is certainly potential here, I think, for the future, and I welcome the report that's been given. Mention is made, of course, of the Mould area, and again, we're fortunate insofar as we got the Mould Allen High School and Ysgol Maesgarmon and the Brinkhall School in very close proximity in that area, so much benefit could accrue from that. But again, as I say, currently there doesn't seem to be a great deal in for us, but certainly something we can examine and take forward for future as the developments improve in this particular connection. And again, from the report, it would seem that if we were to use the water currently, we'd have to have a backup and again supplement it with other forms of heating, so the savings that might be accrued will not be there at the current time. So thanks again for the report. It's been well worthwhile. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coggins-Cogan.
Thank you, Chair. Oh yes, that's it. So I momentarily forgot what I was going to ask. So I was distracted because of Bolsover District Council, so I got distracted by the beast of Bolsover, Dennis Skinner. Yeah, I know, quite. No, I wanted to perhaps tread on the toes of Councillors Healy and Rose, because I think Councillor Healy said that they asked for this report when he was on the Climate Change Committee, which is that committee's has been used a couple of times as a political football, and said that they don't create any reports. Well, this is, a valuable report. It's sort of one that we can't pursue because we haven't got the technology or the funding to make it work at the moment, but it's still a valuable piece of research. And thank you to the officers and thank you to the much maligned committee.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Wakeland, then.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a technical. I read through the report and I couldn't find it. There are sort of hints to it. So on page 25, 108, it was talking about heat loss through distances and things. With Councillor Rose suggesting it goes into the possible LDP and things. Obviously, once you take out the warm, or you're removing the warm water, this water's been there for quite some time. I mean, some places 100 years. Is the calculation done for the sort of refresh? Because if you build say a 40-house housing estate all on heat pumps, you could have no hot water in, I don't know, a week, a month. Are these things taken into account? I'd hate to us to follow a project in, say, 10 years' time and end up with, I don't know, like Mould Allen School or Harden High relying on this, and then all of a sudden they come into school one day and the mine's cold type thing. Is that something they look into?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. As you would expect, there's an awful lot of feasibility work that goes into this. And my my gut reaction, and I caveat this with absolutely not being a technical expert in this whatsoever, is that this might be more feasible for housing developments, for example, rather than council assets. And I think as long as the energy is harnessed from a global perspective, does it really matter as long as we're harnessing the energy? But there's all manner of different calculations that need to be made around heat loss, for example. So although I'm not an expert, I can understand that the further you pipe, the more you lose the heat. And my reading of this is that it's most successful when it's on a loop system, because that avoids contaminants and the likes as well. So there's a huge amount of technical work and feasibility work that will go into it, I think, before a green button was pressed to implement that into any, whether that be a commercial scheme, whether it be a local authority scheme. So it's not something that you would just do on a whim, if that makes sense. But all of those constraints that you're talking about are some of the real reasons why it's not feasible at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dolphin.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it's a very interesting report. The Gateshead scheme is quoted, and if you look online, it immediately accounts for £19.2 million, which seems apparently a lot smaller scheme than the Harden one would be required, which would need from the Prescott level, where the water pops on the surface, which is preferable to drilling boreholes, because then it becomes really prohibitive. The cost of drilling is very, very expensive. It would then come across private land with planning permissions and agreements and all the rest of it, and then would serve Harden High School. And they would still need gas boilers or heat pumps. It wouldn't just be, that power wouldn't be sufficient for the school. So it's just down the road from here. But this morning on Radio Wales, I'm an avid Radio Wales listener. I advise anybody to listen to it if they're local and want to know what's going on in the news. This item was on at 10 to 8, and it was also on their news item at 8 o'clock, and it may have been on at other times. And they were talking to Gareth Farr, who reviewed and approved this coal authority report. And he was talking about water popping on the surface. He did talk about viability and affordability for taxpayers. They didn't give any figures out, but they made the schemes all sound very simple on the radio, with the water just popping on the surface and you getting it to where you need it, and it all works. And that's basically as simple as it seemed. So it didn't go into any great detail at all. But as we know, it is very, very prohibitive, the cost. If we say we already know a Gateshead scheme, £20 million, it's going to be a lot more than that, double probably at least. So it's something for the future, and no doubt there will be reports for Ben, who's now on screen, to come forward with in the future. And on one of those reports, it may say we're going to do it when Ben's a lot older. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. No further speakers on that. Shall we move to the recommendation on page 22, which is the committee, or should we say the Scrutiny Committee, acknowledges the information contained within the report. Can we have a mover? Moved, seconded. Show of hands, those in favour. That's carried. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item 7, the Council's carbon footprint. Can I hand over to the Chief Officer?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is an update on our position and our performance in terms of our carbon reduction position, and Ben is thankfully going to introduce and take you through this report, members. Thank you.
Right, thank you, David, and thank you, Chair. I'll take you through this report now, if I just find the top of it. So, yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. The carbon footprint update for 2024 to 25 presents the results of the Council's carbon calculation for the period that rests between the 1st of April 24 to the 31st of March 25. As with previous reports, we compare these emissions to our 2018 to 2019 baseline, and then the previous reporting year, which in this case is 2023 to 24. A note to make as part of this report, following our review of the climate change strategy over 24 and 25. We have now decided to report on procurement emissions separately, which we have put in this report. We calculate this carbon footprint annually because we are measuring the quantity of our greenhouse gas emissions to help reduce them and work towards Welsh Government's aims for net zero carbon public sector by 2030. As we start in the report, we have section 1.03 on page 100 to 102, and this shows the Council's carbon footprint for the 24 to 25 period. The total carbon footprint was 15,178 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent. This is a 23.3% reduction since our baseline year, and compared to the previous year has seen a 0.71% increase. Please do note that these changes, excuse me, are compared to also previous year's emissions that we have actually now updated following a new methodology that we've included for employee commute. So the employee commute methodology on previous years has now been updated for reflection. In figure 2, we've included a graph here from Welsh Government, and this shows the Welsh local authorities between 2020 and 2025 and their emissions from buildings and transport and a little bit from waste. And we've included this because we can see that there are trends are similar here than to that of the council as well, where more recent years have seen some stabilisation of emissions and maybe a couple of increases. Figure 3 shows the procurement emissions that I've mentioned. They have increased 25.8% compared to last year, and overall since the baseline year there's been a 167% increase. As has been reported previously, due to the methodology used for procurement emissions, these are, as always, unlikely to be reflective of the real world, but there has been some improvements in the methodology, which I'll detail in a second. Section 1.04 on page 102 shows that in 2025, the council's land is estimated to sequester just over 1,600 tonnes of carbon dioxide, and our renewable energy generation fell 4.7%, and this is due to lower sunshine hours within the 2024 year, some equipment downtime, and also some inefficiencies. In section 1.05, between pages 102 and 104, we do explain why these emissions have changed in this period compared to the previous year, and I'll start to detail those now. If we look at the building theme emissions, these have increased by 0.2% compared to last year, with an overall baseline year reduction of 29.5%. There has been a 0.4 increase in building heating emissions. This is likely a result of colder winter months. However, further increases, we should note, will have been mitigated as we invest in our buildings to make them more efficient. There has been a 2.4% increase for electricity emissions, and this is likely a result of reduced solar generation from downtime, also reduced sunshine hours, and as we see buildings moving from gas heating to electrified heating, we will see a transfer of energy use and emissions from those activities. Emissions from street lighting, electricity reduced by 6.1% compared to last year, and nearly 49% since the baseline year. I want to note in this report that we are reliant on grid electricity decarbonisation to help us along this journey, and the grid emission factors for electricity are unchanged since last year. But as the UK government is putting in significant investments into our infrastructure, we do expect to see this helping us in the future. Mobility and transport emissions have decreased by 16% since the baseline year, and we've seen a 1.2% increase from the previous year as a result of fleet and business travel. And with regards to fleet, that is seen as a 6.5% increase year on year, which is explained by operational and service delivery factors, including the requirement for 10 additional HEVs throughout the year and a prolonged winter gritting programme. The service has now purchased a new fleet of Euro 6 vehicles, and which will help with emission reductions, and we should also see the release of excess vehicles that have been in previous years, which will further help to reduce our year-on-year emissions. It should be noted, however, that to obtain considerable reductions, we do need our fleet to transition to ultra-low emission vehicles, and there is work ongoing to determine how to do this. Continuing on mobility and transport, we also measure emissions from business travel, and for business travel by car, emissions have increased 1.8% year on year. But as we have seen in previous years where there's been quite large increases, this increase for this period may suggest that there's a stabilising of emissions since COVID-19. So that's seen more as a potentially a bit of a positive note where we're seeing stabilisation and we can start to understand those emissions a bit further. An increase of emissions from business travel by rail is explained by having a complete record of rail travel for the first time since COVID-19. To support the reduction of employee commuting and business travel emissions, the Council has adopted the Healthy Travel Charter and has also published an internal webpage for employee sustainable travel, so helping to advise our employees on what options are available and where. But without improvements to public transport services, the impact of these efforts will be limited in some regard. And finally, on procurement emissions, these have increased because there have been increases in emission factors in categories where the council has high levels of spend, and these emission factors are now updated annually, as wasn't the case a few years back. So we'll see changes in those as time goes on. I just want to quickly cover some methodology improvements as well that we've brought in over the past year. So section 1.06 on pages 104 to 107 gives a bit more detail on this, and I'll start with employee commute emissions. To improve our understanding of employee commute emissions, we introduced a new survey-based methodology which replaces a methodology that has been used since the baseline year. This previous methodology had been based on average commute distance and travel mode share from a 2013 report by the RAC, and with that it brought several issues. So, for example, there were issues where changes in emissions were only impacted by changes in employee headcount and the number of days worked per year. We weren't sure whether the figures provided were for a single or a return commute, so in that case we assumed return. And the data doesn't reflect Flintshire County Council employees either. Another issue with this that we found is that it actually assumes by having a single commute distance, that it assumes that irrespective of how you travel to work, you're travelling the same distance. And it also doesn't reflect, allow us to see those trends in travel choices as time goes on. So to address these issues and increase accuracy, we launched this travel survey in June 2025 to both employees and elected members. And we asked them to just provide simple data for their typical commute and working arrangements. We were pleased with the response of this. We had 1,283 responses, which were across all portfolios, and this was sufficient to confidently adopt this new methodology, which now meets the highest data quality tier in Welsh Government guidance. The new methodology resulted in an increase in employee commute emissions compared to the previous methodology used, and that is quite simply down to that we are now accounting for return commute correctly, and also we noted that private car use for commuting is much higher than what the previous methodology stated, so it's 89% use for travel instead of 61%. We plan to launch these travel surveys on an annual basis so that we can continue measuring these carbon emissions, but also monitor how employee travel choices are changing over time and how we can support that going forward. With regards to figure one, as I'd mentioned, the new methodology has been applied to previous year's portfolio headcounts and working days to establish new historical emission figures. So it allows us to understand there. What I want to just note with those is that those estimates use current travel behaviours against historical headcounts, so they're not going to be as accurate as the 24 to 25 figures and future figures going forward. We come on to procurement emissions. And the main methodology for this emission source continues to remain spend-based as reported previously. However, as work is ongoing and as that is progressing, we are able to use more accurate methodologies going forward. And in the 2024 to 25 period, we do have some sample data that is now using a methodology called apportioned. So apportioned data is where emissions are equivalent to the share of a supplier's turnover that the council accounts for. So as an example, if the council accounts for half of a supplier's turnover, then we bring half of that supplier's emissions into our carbon calculation. We also received data to calculate the emissions from a couple of construction contracts, so Theatre Clwyd and Mynyddyssa, which is positive, and it continues what we managed to collect the previous year. And table 1 on page 106 shows some comparisons between the 3 types of methodologies that we currently have and how they change the reporting of the emissions, with spend-based showing to overestimate these. And then just lastly, very quickly, another methodology improvement has been for estimating carbon sequestration from the council's land. I did this work by working with our valuation and estates team to understand where our land assets are located. And then I manually mapped those to understand the area and habitats of each asset. This has allowed us to give us greater granularity and understanding of what assets we have and what habitat types we have. There is much greater traceability to the management system, and we can also update these annually, which we weren't able to before. This is still very challenging, however, as can be expected. The natural environment doesn't produce just one figure for carbon sequestration for woodland and one figure for grassland. It does vary a lot, and we are hoping that future guidance will help us to increase our accuracy within these figures. Just to conclude, so section 7 on page 107 states that the 24 to 25 period has seen challenges with emissions from buildings, fleet and business travel increasing related to service demands and weather. However, we have brought in several improvements to methodologies which are allowing us to better understand and monitor our emission sources. The future of reduction of emissions is reliant on a number of factors, including UK grid decarbonisation, as I've mentioned, and also the improved availability and reliability of other sustainable travel choices. What we're hoping to focus on in the coming year is to estimate the carbon footprint for each portfolio. Doing so will allow us to increase ownership and help those portfolios target where they can affect emission reductions. And then also, as mentioned, launch a follow-up employee travel survey this year to compare with last year and see what changes are happening in terms of employee travel choices. So thank you very much for your time, diolch yn fawr, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Councillor Healy.
Sorry, sir, just lost the screen for a minute. Can I thank Ben for his detailed report and for the immensely valuable work which the climate change team are doing? I think that you are now reduced to a team of 2, just yourself and Alex, if I'm correct, which I think draws attention to the real need for it to be recognised that this is a cross-portfolio mission. And I certainly agree with the plan you just mentioned towards the end, that you intend to calculate the carbon emissions of each portfolio area, because I think that does really make the point that the ball is in your court as far as your particular portfolio is concerned. I'm delighted to see that emissions from procurement are being taken out, basically, and dealt with separately, because I do always think that the methodology, the predominant methodology of linking it to spend, it was a situation where you could never win. because of inflation and so forth, and the more that you spend on goods and services, the more your emissions are. I recognise that if you can actually calculate the full emissions accurately, as I think they've done in Theatre Clwyd and some of our other buildings, then you get a more precise figure, which is accurate. So that's good. I noticed in what Ben was saying, there have been other changes in methodology, and I'm wondering about consistency with the baseline of 2018 and 19, that when we compare our emissions now with those of the baseline, whether we are actually comparing like with like. But I did note in one area that I have an idea you might rework the data so that what you are presenting is, in a sense, comparable and meaningful. Changes in methodology is one issue. I'm aware of the fact that our mission to get to net zero places tremendous capital and revenue demands upon the council. And without this necessary funding, we're not going to achieve that result. I happen to be governor of a school that has a problem of heating in that it doesn't have zoning within different parts of the school, apart from a new build that is separate. So basically, when the heating is on, it's on everywhere, and you can't switch it off at different points, which is clearly A, expensive, and B, wasteful. Well, it generates more emissions than are necessary. I'm told that to put that right would cost £1.8 million, and that particular school would also have to have an electricity substation, which would cost £40,000 a year. So it's not going to happen. It's just unrealistic. And there are, I think, probably several examples of cases where to actually reduce our emissions realistically would require significant capital investment that is beyond our capabilities. In the case of schools, I can see why we sometimes just knock the building down and start again and build a new building, getting things right and saying that that's net zero. That's a separate issue. I also recognise that, as you pointed out, a lot hinges on UK investment in the grid so that we've got grid capacity to cope with this. But thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Any comment back, Ben, or you? I'll just move on to Councillor Dan Rose, has just come up with his hand up.
Thanks, Joe. Yep, thanks for that, Ben. Similar to what Councillor Healy was saying, the question really is, if we were to use the current methodology on the baseline that we're using, do we think it would be higher or lower? Quite a simple, estimate from your from what you think at the moment. And do we keep stats against our data charts as to when methodologies change? So in 10 years' time, we can see if there's a significant jump, that there's an explanation for it. It's good to see that the figure for the transport has increased, and that's more like what I was expecting to see in the numbers from the last time. With the this report, obviously the majority of the weather for the income in the renewables is based in 24. So are we expecting a significant increase in that in the next report, given how sunny it's been in 2025, being the sunniest year on record? And obviously also linked to that, obviously we've closed the mould office in terms of heating. Will that be another significant jump and those things, when things like that happens, obviously that is then going to change ongoing our figures for comparison. So do we remove that chunk? You know, if the mall building no longer exists, then do we remove a chunk from the next report to say, well, we're not comparing like to like because that building no longer exists? Or do we just include the total figure? That would be interesting to say what way round you're going to do that. And then in terms of the schools, one of the queries was, especially the high schools, some of them have eco task force and things. Do they play a part in measuring their own carbon footprints and suggesting changes within the schools themselves, as to, you know, the next generation learning what they're doing and how they're going forward with that? Thanks.
Over to you, Ben.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much both for your questions. I'll come back to Councillor Healy's first, just regarding the changes of methodology, and as we advance these and as our understanding and knowledge matures, we try to apply this to the previous years, as we have done in Figure 1, so that where we have, if we have historical calculations that don't follow the type of calculations we use today, then they're much more challenging to compare. And of course, with some of these, they are going to be more of an estimated figure than what we can achieve at this current time. So just to reflect on that one, really, is we try and add these new methodologies to previous years where we can, which should have consistency. In terms of, we understand that bringing in new methodologies and reporting on these can be a little disruptive with the reporting when we're changing figures and updating those. But from the records that I have, I can see that I think all of our emission sources, apart from supply chain now, utilize, at least in some parts, the highest tier of reporting, which wasn't the case before for the likes of employee commute. So some of those emission sources use the highest tier in total, and some use the highest in the middle tiers, where the data allows us to define that. In terms of improvements going forward to methodology, a lot of that is solely now onto the supply chain emission source, which is being worked on with our joint procurement business partner, and then any improvements in the background data to try and pull data up from the middle tier methodology all the way to the top, which we have methodologies, which we have the calculation methods for now. To come on to Councillor Rose's questions there, yes, we do keep, as we've updated the methodology, we know when that's come into play and what the previous emissions would have been before we apply that methodology to the historical figures. We do keep a record of that. We have a tracker, of which we keep well on top of, as you'd expect. And then the baseline with the new commute methodology, which you mentioned, that is applied in Figure 1, as I've mentioned already. So the emissions will be higher for employee commutes now in that baseline year than what was previously reported. With regards to renewables, yes, it was the sunniest year on record in the UK. It's also 2025 was also the hottest UK on record, hottest year on record for the UK, as confirmed by the Met Office. If it's sunnier, we expect more solar generation. So we'll see that in the figures in the coming months. But we do expect to see renewables, at least for solar, to increase in generation, pending improvements to addressing any inefficiencies. You mentioned the mould office, so the closure of County Hall, and other similar types of works that will be happening in the future or in the past. We don't deduct these from our emissions figures because, as part of our climate change strategy, they sit alongside our other actions to decarbonise, and so it helps us to see what achievements that we have made and celebrate those over time in the figures. If we were to deduct that from any kind of reporting, then we fail to acknowledge what we have achieved in the progress that we're making. So, as I say, alongside the impact of putting in any other actions, we would keep the progress with the likes of County Hall within our reporting. And then finally, I think the last one was just a mention on schools and how they are working to reduce emissions. We have a school climate toolkit, which many of you will probably be aware of and has been supported by Councillor Healy in the past. The climate toolkits were launched in 2024 in March, and it's basically the aim of these is a single place for all schools to go to find anything that they need to know about climate change and how to reduce their carbon emissions, how to bring it into their classrooms. There are calculators in there, there's carbon trackers in there, and lesson plans and all other kinds of engagement materials. And there is an equivalent one for town and community councils as well. We have recently issued updates to the toolkits, and we're currently engaging with schools and town and community councils with some workshops this month. And we're always pushing to encourage them and work alongside them to help understand their emissions, reduce them, and then also involve learners throughout that entire process, because there's a lot of skills and knowledge for these learners to gain from this work, which they can then take into their future careers. So hopefully that answers your question there and all the other questions as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Any other questions from members? No other. Oh, Councillor Bithell.
I was interested in Ben's response to Dan's question in relation to, the ending of operations in County Hall. I mean, the move to T Dewi Sant here, one of the factors, one of the reasons given for that was that this was a more environmentally friendly building and would reduce the overall cost really to the authority in terms of heating and lighting and so on. So I think that's important really, because again, we use the same line of argument in respect to other developments and proposals as well. Closing the schools, for example, as it comes to mind. So I think that's important if we can actually calculate and give a figure for what we are saving in terms of not only cash, but also in terms of the contribution to climate change reduction. I think that's important really as a factor, if that can be actually given a figure at the end of the day.
Okay, Ben, do you have a comment on that?
Yes, thank you very much. So we would be, because we have data on a building level, we can see the changes in emissions for the likes of County Hall. So we're able to see what its emissions were and the energy use for County Hall prior to moving employees over to T Dewi Sant, and then conversely what those emissions are going to look like in the future when it's obviously not in operation currently and further work is to be done. We can see how that changes over time. But of course, until such future, we will continue to monitor any energy that is used in there, regardless of how the building's used. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I've got no other speakers, so I'll move to the recommendation on page 99. The change that does say cabinet note, I'll change that to the Scrutiny Committee note the contents of the report and progress made in the past year to improve data collection for the Council's carbon footprint. The mover? Moved and seconded, and show of hands, all those in favour? That's carried by all members. Thank you very much, and thank you, Ben. Right, we've gone beyond 12 o'clock and we need to take a small break. So I suggest we break now and reconvene at 12:30, and we'll start promptly again at 12:30. Okay, thank you. Okay, well, welcome back to the Environment Scrutiny Committee. We'll now move on to agenda item number 8, and that is Connect to Work programme. I'll hand over to Niall.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. We brought the Connect to Work programme to you in July last year at its initial announcement, just to raise awareness of the programme, and undertook to come back when we had more detail and a proposed way forwards, and that is the nature of this report. Just as by way of reminder, this is a UK government funded programme managed strategically by the Department for Work and Pensions, and its purpose is to reduce economic inactivity, especially that relating to ill health. with that in mind, we therefore expect that the programme to particularly to focus on those who are not on work-related benefits, but those who are actually off because of who are not necessarily signing on. So it would therefore be a voluntary programme to encourage them to re-engage with the labour market. It's quite a new approach to Flintshire. The model is one of supported employment, providing intense support to help people to secure paid employment and to retain that employment once they're there. So it's a very different model to what we're used to, where we tend to work with in quite a long-term mentoring way with people to overcome their barriers to employment and then help them into work. This aims to put them into work early. There are two models, as the report highlights, of different levels of intensity, both of which are governed by what's called a fidelity model. It's a very precise, very circumscribed model, quality standard for the programme that has a track record and an evidence base for its success fundamentally. So it's extensively used across England, but it's not a programme that's got any familiarity with us here. It's a sizable programme. Over 2025 to 2026, as we now are, to 2030, we're aiming to support over 800 people in Flintshire. And the total programme value is in a region of £3 million or thereabouts. So it's not a small programme by any stretch of imagination. The aim regionally is that we will start in the first quarter of 2026-27. I have to say probably towards the end of that period, sadly. And having reviewed the programme, all the risks, all the considerations, our proposal is actually we can contract out the provision for both elements. The report highlights two elements to that. For the less intensive but larger IPS option element, we will work with Wrexham on a shared procurement so that the two counties deliver it together. The remaining 4 counties have employability teams that they're looking to deliver this through. We don't have the same in our 2 counties. And in terms of the more intensive SEQF element, because that is very different to anything we deliver currently, the proposal is that 5 of the 6 North Wales authorities work together and do a shared procurement for that, basically. So from a Flintshire context, both programme elements will be contracted out. The benefits that are outlined in the report, but in summary, first of all, we will gain a qualified organisation. It could be a company, could be a third sector organisation, to deliver it for us. This is an area we have no expertise, very little track record, and it would give us skilled and experienced pairs of hands from day one. So it will give the best quality service to the participants. The second reason is one of internal capacity. It would minimise the amount of management input required. Don't get me wrong, it's still going to be considerable. We are going to have to effectively contract manage this, to monitor this, to manage every stage, just to make sure it fits comfortably into the range of provision that's already in Flintshire, and that's quite a significant time burden for which the programme will reimburse us, I hasten to add. But contract managing a pair of contracts is a very different ask compared to actually having to employ a team of maybe up to 15 people and managing them. That's a very different scale of input required. So it represents a big saving in terms of capacity internally. And then the third benefit is that it is a sizable programme. We could be talking somewhere in the region between 10 and 15 members of staff needed to be employed for a period of 3 years. If we employ those staff ourselves, we are liable for their redundancy costs at the end of the programme. And that's a significant revenue burden to the council, particularly if those staff have built up significant public service years of service. That could be very significant, as you know from previous reports. So we are anxious to avoid that, and this is a way of preventing us having to become liable for those costs. Hopefully, it's been a shared procurement as well, and there's economies of scale there, both in terms of undertaking the procurement exercise, but also in getting a better, higher value service from the successful contractors as well. So that's what's proposed in the report. You'll see there are 4 recommendations. Apologies, they're written as cabinet recommendations. My apologies for that. First is that you just review where we're at and make sure you're comfortable with the progress made. And then we will be asking cabinet for 3 sets of delegated authorities. Firstly, to procure the contractors. Secondly, to then manage the programme effectively, and then finally to sign a funding agreement with Denbighshire County Council, who are acting as the accountable body for the programme. And we would like this committee's support for those three recommendations as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Open it for questions. Councillor Pearce.
Yeah, thank you, Niall. I recall this coming to the committee previously, a number of questions. 840 participants between now and 2030. The quoted cost is 3,700 per participant. It seems a lot of money just to sort of take someone through from potential unemployment to employment. Is there any breakdown of those costs? I assume it is fully funded, each participant. It does say in 117 that it's worth £2 million over the lifetime of the contract to Flintshire. Is that a benefit to Flintshire, or is that the funding that's being given that will be 100% used for this programme, or will there be any sort of financial advantage in that? It also talks about appointing a company to run this. Is that also fully funded as well? So I just need some clarity, if I can, please, Niall, on the fact that on page 118, it talks about a cost of redundancy and therefore putting a significant pressure onto the authority. So could you clarify whether we are going to employ people that could be a significant pressure to the county, or are we going to use a company that's fully funded to do the work for us? I think the scheme is good. If it gets people in work, it's great. But I don't want to see the county council disadvantaged by supporting the scheme where we could lose out financially. That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Yep, really good questions. First of all, yes, the whole programme is fully funded. There is there's no cost implication of any significance on the council, and the proposed way forwards, but by contracting it out, really assures that. It means that we're not at the end of the programme going to face significant redundancy costs. We will have to employ, as the report highlights, a single extra person, a contract manager, because that's not something that can be absorbed within existing staff teams. So that's the only place where there will be a potential cost at the end of the end of that contract. Otherwise, we've mitigated that risk completely by passing it on to a third party. There is a small opportunity for a small income for the council in that a proportion of manager time will be costed to the programme, and so there will be a small income, but it's not going to be huge amounts. But we will maximise every opportunity we can to earn money for the council, as we always do. The £3,700 is a lot of money, but compared to general employability programmes, it's an extremely small amount of money. Generally, the money per head is better than that. I'll give you an example from the SEQF programme, the more intensive model within the programme. Not only is that person is there somebody there to work with each person for a period of probably 12 months or more, could be considerably longer. They will meet with that person regularly. They will have a caseload of no more than 25, so they won't have many people on the caseload because of the intensive nature of the programme. And that support could also be as far as actually going into the workplace and coaching the person on how to undertake their new task. So help breaking down their new job stage by stage so they can learn it effectively, as well as supporting the employer and training the employer how to work with their new recruit. So when you look at the scale of the programme and how intense the intervention is, you can see that actually that money is extremely light touch, really, to be honest. But it reflects the more commercial reality that DWP work in than we're used to generally, where actually these programmes are a little bit better funded generally, to be honest. So yeah, one of the challenges of the programme is just that. Can we get contractors who can work for that sum? Hopefully we can. DWP is confident, so yeah, fingers crossed.
Did you want to come back? No.
Yeah, if I may, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just this cost of redundancy where it says it'll, a significant cost on the council. That just sort of worries me slightly, that we are helping people into work via a government-funded scheme that could leave us out of pocket at the end of this. Is that the case?
So I should explain, the left-hand column is the risks as I brought you in July. The right-hand column is the current status. So that if we were to run the programme ourselves internally with 10, 15 members of staff, the potential redundancy cost at the end would be significant, and it ends as a question mark whether the programme would cover those costs. If we undertake the programme the way that it's suggested with a single person, yes, we still have a redundancy cost risk at the end. Obviously, we would hope the person will find another job, but in which case there wouldn't be a redundancy. But bottom line is it's mitigated to one post, not 14, 15 posts. So we have mitigated that down as far as we possibly can. Unfortunately, very few programmes exist that we don't pick up these risks. We are always in a situation where people offer short-term pots of money for different programmes. Occasionally you can cover redundancy costs, oftentimes you can't, and unfortunately that's just the nature of the work we're in. Usually it works out reasonably well. People find alternative employment or could be redeployed in other activities. Once in a while we get caught out and we end up paying some redundancy costs, as we did a year or two back with Communities for Work Plus programme, where we ended up having to pick up some costs, but generally it works out fairly well. But unfortunately it's the cost of short-term programmes. We end up picking up the tab potentially. What we have done is minimise it to the maximum we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. Chris Biddle.
Yes, thank you for the report. Again, this is something which is to be welcomed. We see report after report which tells us that something like a fifth of the population, working population, of people of working age are not in work, and some of them have never worked, and some of them probably have no intention of working. And again, that comes at a cost. It comes at a cost to the taxpayer generally, and obviously, again, various reports have demonstrated that it's not good for the individuals themselves either. Work is good, and people gain a freedom through work, and they also gain sociability, and social links, which are important to them and their development and their general health and well-being. So again, it's a very welcome proposal. I notice with a bit of concern that participants will join this voluntarily. They don't have to get involved, and that's concerning because again, those people who have no wish and no intention of working ever, are not going to be involved in this, obviously. So the problem remains to a certain extent. And again, even with this, I notice on page. It's under the risks there that only 50% will be expected to actually enter employment as a result of this. That's half. And again, it's stated there that's a pretty good result, really. I'm not so sure myself, and where other people would see it in that particular sense. But I would hope that people do enter this, and I'd like to see some sort of pressure put on them to actually engage in this, because again, I think they'll get something out of the course themselves as a consequence, and it does give them that uplift and the potential to enter the working community. The other concern I've got is the one which has been raised by Councillor Pearce. We end up in this trap continually as a local authority. There are good schemes like this one which we want to be engaged with because of the benefits that it brings to members of our community and to the general working population. But as a consequence of this, we have very often ended up with the bill for redundancy, and it's happened time and time again. Now, I noticed the point that you made. It's only the one individual, the person in charge, that will be responsible for providing redundancy pay, but nonetheless, it is an expense to the council taxpayer here in Flintshire, and something which we want to try to avoid if at all possible. Is there any means or mechanism whereby we can actually put some money aside for this particular purpose, if necessary, so that we are covered and it does not become a encumbrance, really, for the local taxpayer? Thank you.
I'll pick up the second one first. Yes, we could. I say we will generate a small income from the programme. So that could be ring fenced for that purpose. But just to emphasise, we very rarely end up in a position where we have to pay out these redundancy costs. People transfer to other programmes. People leave before the programme ends, which brings its own issues, but often they do. People don't wait till the axe falls generally, or they find other employment. It's not been that often I've come to you with a report from one of our short-term programmes that's asked for a significant redundancy cost. It's been quite rare. In fact, probably that Communities for Work Plus report last year, I think it was the first time in many years. So please don't overestimate the scale of the problem. It's relatively light touch, but I just need to make you aware that it exists as a risk, but it's not a significant risk, and we've minimised it down to a single one. But yes, we could. Any management income for the project could be ring fenced for that purpose. That wouldn't be particularly be a problem. Just in terms of the I suppose the compulsion element of the programme, I just want to emphasise that this is a programme that isn't working with people on in-work benefits, where DWP applies significant compulsion to people to join different programmes. I have to say, we don't operate any of those programmes and never have done. The people that join us join us because of they want to gain the benefits of the programme. This is an extremely sensitive area. We're dealing with people who may not have worked for some time. They will have their finances based around their benefits, which will may or may not be meeting their needs currently. They may have disabilities or ill health. They may have caring responsibilities. There's a lot of challenges in people's lives there. And whilst I understand what you're saying in terms of we want to really encourage that, we're dealing with a client group who are, for many places, particularly sensitive and particularly vulnerable, and actually a caring and caring approach that encourages them with the benefits of this, I think will have more impact. You're right that there are a cohort who have never worked and may not want to work, but fundamentally there's quite a large cohort who really want to work, but there are barriers that are preventing them to do so, and that may be their ill health, it may be their caring responsibilities. It may be that employers are not willing to give them the chance, or perhaps lack the skills and confidence to pick up people who are outside of their usual recruitment pools. And I think that's where this programme could really play a part in helping employers to broaden their recruitment practices, to help them to be more flexible with those people when they arrive, and to provide that really intensive support to both the employer and the participant to make a success of that job. And I should stress there that the employment that we're talking about here is genuinely market employment. These aren't work placements, they aren't voluntary placements, this isn't work experience. Every one of the people that goes through this programme has to get a proper competitive job. So it's quite a big ask from that perspective, but yeah, I think the design of the programme hopefully gives us the opportunity to engage those people in a very sensitive, very supportive manner to get them on board. And hopefully, I think there's going to be enough participants who want to work that we'll be able to work with.
Okay.
Let's go back to thank you for the response to that, Niall. The mention is made there that about 50% are expected to enter the employment market as a consequence of this, which is good. I've asked this question again in the past in relation to similar schemes. Can we also keep a record or access information as to how many of those people will still be in employment a year later, as it were? Again, because some of the comments that have been made in the past in relation to previous schemes, such as this, is that they drop out soon after they gain that employment for whatever reason. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Dunrose.
Yeah, thanks for this. It seems like quite a big project, really. In terms of the cost per person, 3,700, you said there's no more than 25 individuals that person will work with. So that's just over £90,000 for that individual to work with those people. How much of that is do we have, obviously with this being a shared function with some of the other authorities, do we have any say in saying we want this to go to a non-profit to make, or a third sector organisation, one of the colleges, to make certain that fund is utilised not for profit for this kind of makeup, or do we not have a say in that? Because obviously, depending on how much of that, I wouldn't expect many employers to hand that fund straight over to the employee sort of thing, but I'd expect a significant skill set or experience to do a role like this, working with individuals with these kinds of needs. So my question really is about is there a possibility of putting a cap on any profits if this is going to a private market, or forcing or encouraging prioritizing a third sector or charitable provider to do it?
You're right in that it's a shared procurement. Denbighshire County Council will lead the procurement on our behalf. We haven't yet considered. The brief is still being sketched out at the moment, so it's still quite early days. But I will flag up your comments there in terms of what encouragement through that tender process can we give to the third sector and to the social business sector. Ultimately, we will have to work within the procurement rules, which limit how much we can specify that. But yeah, we'll pick that up. Thank you for the comment and flag that to Denbighshire. What I would also say, and again picking up the comments of the £3,700 per head, that's the average. It will vary dramatically depending on the needs of each individual. It's also a very bureaucratic programme. It's an intense amount of paperwork required for the provider as well as the success of the programme, as it highlights in the risks, being heavily dependent on them being successful in persuading employers to engage in the programme and to provide employment to this client group. So don't think that perhaps this programme is got a lot of wiggle room in terms of profit. It's really not. There is a significant risk that nobody will bid for it because it's so tight. So no one really is going to come out the far end of this. The other with a lot of profit in their pocket. The other element as well is it's got a very, very intense quality standard behind it. I mentioned in passing the fidelity model earlier. So every element of the person's experience is governed by a whole range of quality standards which are intensively measured. So the opportunity to cut corners to make more profit is also they're not in this programme. It's going to be very, very tight. But I think your point's well made in terms of what encouragement can we give to third sector and social business. So I'll flag that up and pass it on to Denbighshire. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Any other members with questions to raise? Nobody's indicated. Okay, we'll move to the recommendations on page 113. Recommendation 1 is okay as it's worded. Recommendations 2, 3 and 4 need to just be with the pre-element that the Environment and Economy Overview and Scrutiny Committee support the delegated authority and so on. So with that in mind, can I have a mover? Moved, seconded. Show of hands, those in favour. That's carried. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 11, which is a part 2 item. And so we need to move that we exclude any press or public. Can I have a mover? Moved, seconded. Show of hands. Okay, that's carried. So the live session can now close.